And we had been throwing around the idea for a while about actually being public with our fundraising members. And so that was kind of a, like, it was one of these things that was new, can we possibly, is it smart to do that? No other campaign that I know of had really ever been public with the amount of money that they were raising for obvious reasons, right? Like if you decide, you go public with your fundraising members and you show that you've raised, $20,000 in a 3-month period, well, that's not really, it's not really going to, benefit you to have that information out there. What we basically realized is that the more transparent we became over time, the more people wanted to give because they were getting instant feedback on how their donation was contributing. And so what we did, for example, was we can't really see the graphics here because it doesn't have a flash installed, but towards the end of the third fundraising quarter, the end of September, we ended up putting a graphic on our website that was sort of we had this little quill-shaped pen and said, let's try to get 1,787 donors and fill this, this stupid little quill-shaped pen. I mean, it's something so silly, right? And people basically got jazzed up and said, oh man, I see the green thing, the pen being filled, and you have all these people being excited to see this, this stupid little pen be filled up. And so it was interesting because it was, it was just sort of, well, it's the first time we're kind of, we went transparent in the sense of the number of donors. And people responded. We ended up, I think it was doubling the number of, the number of donors we had wanted to get. And so it was it ended up becoming the last week of September. And we talked about, being totally transparent, basically setting a goal for people, and then trying to get them to meet that goal. And so we threw out a number of $500,000, and the reason I laugh at Justine is because at the time, we put this out there and we thought, well, let's be fully transparent for 1 week. This way, no one will really, the other campaigns won't really be able to figure out how much we've raised. And Justine and another guy in our campaign actually both separately came up to me and were like, $500,000 in 1 week. That's a boatload of money. Is it really possible to do something like that? I think at that point we hadn't raised more than about $200,000 in 1 week. And so we stuck with it anyway. And put up this graphic with a little thermometer this time, counting up to $500,000. And lo and behold, within about 3 to 3.5 days, we had raised the $500,000. And so, this was again, we had no idea, and I was hoping, maybe we'll get something like $300,000 or $400,000 in the last week of the month. And we ended up getting it, in 3 or 3.5 days. And it had to, update the graphic to be $1 million in 1 week, and cross out this, and it had this an interactive flash graphic that crossed out the 500,000, and then said, raise $1 million, give Ron Paul $1 million boost. And so the thing that's interesting about it, and the thing that we pulled away from it was, one, the goal matters, right? Coming out and saying we're trying to raise this much money, really resonated with people. And so putting a hard number that people were trying to meet was really important. The transparency, though, is also important because it gave people instant feedback. So a lot of times, right, if you go to John Edwards at the same time was doing a similar type of thing. He wanted to raise $1 million in 10 days. But the thing that you notice is on his website, you couldn't really tell. There was no way of knowing how much he was raising. So you go and you make your donation of $100 or $500 or $1,000, and you don't get any sort of feedback on how you're contributing to what's being met. With our graphic, basically people had their little thermometer, and every 30 seconds the graphic would update, and it would give this little burst, and then we also had the name flashing on the screen, and so people were like, oh, this is really cool. Now I see my name, I'm contributing to Ron Paul, and I see the thermometer going up, and people were really pumped about it. So the transparency was actually really important for us because people were getting basically getting feedback and feeling like they were contributing to the goal that we ended up setting out. And so it was just that was a sort of, again, it was an accident, it was an idea that we had no idea how successful it was going to be. And so then we ended up doing the same thing for the fourth quarter. We decided, well, this really worked, and we raised way more by being transparent than not being transparent. So let's essentially set some sort of outlandish goal that we think will, and we'll just see basically see what happens. And so, we ended up raising, I think, $5 million in the third quarter, and so we put up on our, on our website within the first couple weeks of the fourth quarter, let's raise $12 million by the end of December, which at the time seemed ludicrous to myself included, that we would try raising $12 million in 1 quarter. I mean, this was basically what Rudy Giuliani and Mitt Romney were raising. And so of course the initial reaction from our supporters were like, this is ridiculous, I'll never be able to raise this, what happened was, again, by like having the feedback, someone, so I don't know, have you guys heard about the whole like money bombs and that sort of thing that people have done? So the story behind that is a really interesting one. So like we put this graphic up, right? We had no idea how it was going to happen. Like we didn't know, how much we were going to end up raising. And there was this guy, 28-year-old kid, a computer programmer in Huntington Beach, California, James Sugra. And he basically came home from work one day and signed on to Facebook. And someone put a little post on Facebook saying, something to the effect of, wouldn't it be really cool if we got everyone to donate on one day? And so the thing that's interesting about that is that, like, basically, here we had this, like, new, like, it was like a Statue of Liberty, interactive graphic. But of course, it was going all the way up to 12 million, so you couldn't really see the thing moving. So the thought that, like, this guy had was like, well, if we all donated on one day, we would see this stupid little graphic, like, move up. And so James Duber comes home from work, he signs on Facebook, he reads this message, and he says, that's a really interesting idea. And for whatever reason, the thought of, like, V for Vendetta pops into his head. He's like, it'd be really cool. Remember the 5th of November. I get everyone to donate on this one day in November. And so he created this little, like, YouTube video that was promoting people making donations all on one day in November. And like, posted on YouTube. And a bunch of other people, like, saw it, and, like, he got a decent number of views. And about a week later, an independent music promoter, 39 years old in Florida, Trevor Lyman, ended up like seeing this video and was like, I should put this on a web page. And so he just registered this web page, remember the 5th or 5th of November or something like that, and asked James whether he could put the video up, and put the video up on his website, and lo and behold, the rest of the time it was a history, and on November 5th, we ended up raising over $4 million, which is an absurd amount, and put us at something like $7 million for the quarter toward the beginning of November. And then they did it again in December, and we ended up basically raising $20 million this last quarter. And so anyway, on top of the things that I talked about, like the goal and the transparency and that sort of thing being important. The other thing is a lot of it was like trial by error. There was no like I would love to say, someone in the campaign had the foresight to know what was going to happen, like fundraising wise, but we didn't, and still are like struggling to understand it. And a lot of it was accidental, and it was just kind of figuring things out along the way. But anyway, that's kind of the short story of fundraising on the fall campaign.